If you should have any questions during the webinar, we will be saving them for the end. If we do not get to your question in time, we'll try to curate those and answer them offline in an extended Q&A. Let's go ahead and get started. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics: defining the difference between state-driven versus status-driven alerts, setting up a state-driven alert, setting up a status-driven alert, testing alerts, managing your email queue, and the global email queue setting. And as I said earlier, there will be a Q&A after the webinar. The first thing on today's agenda is defining state-driven and status-driven alerts and the difference between the two. State-driven alerts are triggered when an LOI, request, grant, or report, basically anything other than a time-based alert, moves from one state to another state. It has a from and a to action attached to it. For example, a request moves from new to pending review. It can be used for letting a grantee and/or project lead know that an application has been moved in the process. A report has been received, a request or report has been sent back, a request or report has been rejected, or a grant award has been approved, etc. When the action occurs, the alert is triggered. A state-driven alert is always based on an action. In status-driven alerts, the condition is either met or not met, or true or false. They are used mostly in reports where time is a condition, such as when a report is due within a certain number of days, or when a report is overdue by a certain number of days. In those cases, examples that you could choose include due within 14 days or less, or overdue 30 days or more. When the condition is true, the alert is triggered. A status alert involves no movement or transition action. Instead, it is either on or off. If you want to send an alert and there is no state before the state selected, you must use a status-triggered alert. So let's start out with setting up a state-driven alert. You will start by creating a new alert. Upon creating a new alert, you will need to give it a title. This is how you will differentiate the alerts from others. The next area is the subject line. This is how the subject line will read in the email. The next section is the request type. You will select requests anytime the transition state will result in the request remaining a request. You will select granted requests if the record will result in the record becoming or remaining a grant. The next section is the body of the email. We will not be covering that section of the alert in this webinar. You can find more information on creating and editing the body of the email in the knowledge base at flux.io/knowledge. The next several sections give you various options of who to send the email alerts to. You can choose specific email addresses in the CC and BCC email address boxes. You can select a specific recipient with the employee profile under recipients. And you may also checkbox the fiscal signatory, primary signatory, and others with roles. The final section to complete is to check the box for state-driven and then the transition state that you want the alert to be triggered at. This means the state the record moves to after being advanced in the workflow via the transition button. Please note that state-driven alerts will not be triggered if the state is manually changed with the edit button or if the state is bulk updated to. Only if the transition button is clicked on the record to advance the state will the email alert be triggered. Now we'll move on to status-driven alerts. As I stated earlier, in status-driven alerts, these alerts are driven by a true or false condition. You can choose any variety of conditions that a record must meet in order for the alert to trigger. Status-driven alerts are most often used for reports, to alert when reports are due or overdue. And the selections that are available to choose from are determined by the filter on that card. For instance, any fields that you want to add conditions onto an alert regularly can be added to the filter. This is done on the form builder and the reports in the filter section. You also have the advanced filter available to set additional fields such as program, status, etc. Once you've got everything set up and the template has been created, you can now test the email to make sure it appears as expected. To do this, you will generate a model ID. So to find a model ID, you simply scroll over the list view of a record. That is the left side of the card. You will notice the model ID in the URL at the bottom of the screen. Enter only this number at the end of the URL into the model ID field and click on Generate Test Alert. Once you confirm that the email is generating as expected, you can now enable the alert. Things to keep in mind is that once you enable a status-based alert, this will trigger an email alert for all records that meet the conditions set within immediately. For instance, if you have reports that are overdue by the time frame set within, all of the reports will trigger instantly. And that brings us to the email queue. But the first thing I'd like to show you is where in the admin panel you can set whether queued emails automatically send once queued or if they need to be manually approved and sent. Here you see the checkbox for automatically approve queued alert emails. In this screenshot, the box is not checked, which means an admin will need to manually approve and send the alerts. Once this box is checked, emails will automatically send once they are triggered. It is recommended that if you're enabling a status-driven alert that you leave this box unchecked so that you can ensure that several unwanted emails do not send automatically. Keep in mind that emails will continue to queue as long as the conditions are met. For instance, if a report is overdue by 30 days, it will queue up every day until the report conditions change. Now let's look at the email queue. You can filter the queue by the name of the alert type, the name of the alert, or the status of the alert. At the bottom is where you will manage the alerts within the queue. The options are to approve and send or to delete. This concludes today's webinar on email alerts. I hope you enjoyed it. If there are any features I did not cover extensively, we will be hosting trainings in the future to address these features. You may also learn about any of these features by visiting our knowledge base. Now let's open it up to questions. Looks like we do have one question here. How do you make an alert stop queuing if it is a status-driven alert? The answer is that you will need to update the record to ensure that the condition set in the email is no longer applicable. For instance, you may need to change the status of the report from report due to report received. Another question here is, how long does it take for an approved email to send? The answer is that approved emails send every 15 to 30 minutes. And that is all based on timing, and as soon as the alert goes in, it goes out in the order in which it was queued. We have one more question here. Is there a way to manually send an email alert? Yes, you can filter for any records that you wish to send the desired alert to. Then you can choose bulk update, choose the desired email alert, and then click on send email alert. This will send the email to all of the records selected. All right, that looks like all the questions that we have today. So we're going to go ahead and call it for today. You'll be able to find video recordings of past webinars, including this one, and any continued Q&A on our knowledge base. So today we went over email alerts. We learned the difference between state-driven and status-driven alerts. We showed you how to set up both state-driven and status-driven alerts. We showed you how and where to test alerts. We covered where the settings are to enable or disable automatically sending queued email alerts. And we also showed you how to manage your email queue. To learn more and access the video recording of this webinar along with any extended Q&A, please visit our knowledge base at flux.io/knowledge. There you'll be able to find a list of upcoming webinars, links to register for future webinars, and recordings of past webinars under training webinars. Feel free to reach out to us at training@fluxlabs.com for questions or suggestions for future webinars. And also feel free to send an email to support@fluxlabs.com if you experience any issues with email alerts. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hosting you for future webinars and workshops. Thanks again.